When Sola finally died, the villagers felt peace again. For the first time in many years, farmers went back to their farms without fear. Nobody worried that yams or cassava would disappear in the night. Women returned from their farmlands with baskets full of food, smiling and thanking God. Goats, chickens, and even dogs could now sleep freely without missing in the morning. Children ran around the village without their mothers calling them inside quickly.
Old mensagem under the big mango tree, chevem colanuta em desmilhem.
They said, "Now Oke-Odo will have peace. The spirit that troubled this land has finally left us." But peace did not last for long. Sola had friends, boys he drank with, boys he smoked with, boys he encouraged in stealing. They were the same ones who laughed when he mocked elders, the same ones who followed him the night he wasted the shrine money on palm wine. At first, everybody thought the curse ended with Sola. They believed his death had carried away the darkness. But soon, strange things started happening. Some nights, people said they heard footsteps near their barns. When they went out in the morning, tubers of yam had disappeared again. A widow cried one morning that her only goat was missing. Another man shouted that his fish pond had been emptied overnight. Worse still, some villagers began to whisper that they had seen Sola's shadow. A hunter swore that, deep in the forest, he saw someone that looked exactly like Sola, standing beside a tree and smiling. The man ran back to the village sweating, shouting, "Sola is not gone. I saw him with my 2 eyes." The villagers laughed at him at first. They said he was drunk. But when more strange things continued, people began to fear again. Children refused to go out in the evening. Women stopped going to the stream alone. Men stayed up at night, holding cutlasses and sticks. It seemed Sola's death was not the end of their trouble. It was only the beginning of another one. It began with Kunnel, Sola's closest friend. Kunnel was known in the village as a strong man, a man who could carry 2 bags of yam on his shoulders without resting. He was the one who always laughed the loudest whenever Sola misbehaved. People said he and Sola were like brothers, never apart. One evening, Kunnel came back from the farm, tired but happy. His wife had prepared hot pounded yam with vegetable soup. He washed his hands, sat on the wooden bench, and started eating. But before he could finish the first swallow, he suddenly began to cough. At first, his wife thought it was ordinary. Maybe the food went the wrong way. But the coughing became stronger. He held his chest, opened his mouth, and blood poured out. His wife screamed and ran to hold him, but his body shook as if something invisible was dragging his soul. Before she could run out to call for help, Kunnel had fallen to the ground. His eyes rolled back, and his body became still. He died before midnight. The news spread like wildfire. By morning, the whole village had gathered in front of Kunnel's compound. Women cried. Men stood in groups, whispering. "This is not ordinary," one old man said. "Kunnel was healthy. How can he die just like that?" Another woman, shaking her head, added, "Do you people remember? Kunnel was with Sola the night they stole from the shrine. Maybe the gods are not done yet." Fear entered the village again. Parents began to warn their children in low voices. "Stay away from those boys who followed Sola. Their hands are dirty. Whoever walks with evil will share in his punishment." That night, Kunnel's wife wailed bitterly. She held her children and cried, "Your father has left me. Who will take care of us now?" He thought following Sola would bring him joy, but see what it has brought us, tears and shame. The villagers shook their heads in pity, but deep down, many of them were afraid. If Kunnel could die so suddenly, who would be next? But Kunnel's death was only the beginning. Within weeks, another of Sola's drinking friends, Ganiyu, fell sick. At first, people thought it was ordinary malaria. He was a strong farmer, always laughing and full of life. But suddenly his body became very hot, like fire. No matter how many herbs his wife boiled, nothing worked. Every night, his cries filled the compound. He shouted in pain, calling his late mother's name, rolling on the ground as if unseen hands were pressing him down. Neighbors gathered, whispering, afraid to go too close. One evening, as the cock crowed for the last time before dawn, Ganiyu gave a loud scream, shook violently, and then went silent. His wife ran out, rolling on the ground and tearing her clothes. By morning, Ganiyu was gone. The village had not recovered from Ganiyu's death when tragedy struck again. This time it was Dare. Dare was known as the most fearless among Sola's friends. He always boasted, saying, "Nothing can kill me, not even the gods." But pride met him suddenly. He went to fetch water at the stream one morning and never returned. Hours later, hunters found his lifeless body floating near the rocks. His eyes were open, and his hands were stretched out as if he was begging for help. Nobody knew how he entered the water, because Dare could swim very well. The gods did not stop there. One by one, the boys who followed Sola that night began to die. Some died quietly in their sleep, without sickness, without warning. Some were struck down suddenly on the road, falling like trees cut by an axe. Some became sick, burning with fever, crying out until death silenced them. The wailing of women filled Oke-Odo. Young wives became widows overnight. Mothers wept bitterly, beating their chests, mourning their sons who had died before their time. At every burial, people shook their heads and muttered, "Sola has brought a great curse upon this land. His sin is still speaking, even from the grave." Fear spread everywhere. Even children no longer played outside at night. Farmers stopped staying too long in the bush. People avoided the shrine road completely, even in daylight. It was as if the shadow of Sola still walked among them, dragging his friends one after the other into the grave. By now, the whole village was in fear. The once lively Oke-Odo had become silent like a graveyard. At night, no sound of laughter was heard again. The palm wine joints that used to be full of music, quarrels, and clapping were now empty. Calabashes of palm wine sat untouched, flies dancing around them. Boys who once walked proudly in groups now avoided each other. Nobody wanted to be suspected of having followed Sola. Even friends stopped visiting one another. Everybody stayed inside once the sun went down. Even those who were not with Sola that night began to feel the sting of suspicion. People pointed fingers at neighbors in secret. Maybe he was part of them. Maybe she knows what they did. Maybe their family also joined. Whispers turned into quarrels. Families fought. Brothers accused brothers. Wives argued with their husbands. Trust disappeared completely from Oke-Odo. Fear was now sitting on every roof. One evening, the elders called a meeting at the village square. Nobody wanted to be late, because the matter concerned the life of everyone. The moon shone above, and the fire from the torches made shadows dance on the ground. Chief ADEMOYE, the oldest man in the village, stood slowly. His gray beard shook as he leaned on his staff. He raised his voice and said, "We must find a way to cleanse this land. If not, the curse will destroy us all. Already, widows fill our streets. Already, mothers bury their sons. Must we all wait until death knocks on every door?" The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded their heads, others wept silently. But the shrine priest, Baba Owanafari, shook his head sadly. His eyes were red, and his voice carried sorrow. "The gods are angry," he said. "The sacrifice we offer, they reject. The sin of one man has spread to all who followed him. It cannot be reversed." The crowd wailed in fear. Women beat their chests and rolled on the ground. Men covered their faces with their hands, too ashamed and afraid to look at one another. An old woman shouted from the back, "So we are finished."
The children of Oke-Odo will all die like goats in the market.
The priest did not answer. He simply looked at the sky and shook his head again. That night, the village did not sleep. Mothers held their children close, fathers sat by the doorway with cutlasses, and nobody trusted the silence of the dark. It was as if death itself was walking slowly, choosing whose door to knock next. It was not only the boys who followed Sola that suffered. Their families too felt the pain. The wives of the dead men became shadows of themselves. Widows cried day and night, holding their babies, with no husband to care for them. Their tears never seemed to dry. Some sat at their doorsteps staring into the empty night, whispering, "Why did my husband follow Sola? Why did he bring this curse on us?" Mothers buried their sons and had no strength to live again. Some refused to eat. Some sat in silence, rocking themselves back and forth, their eyes swollen from too much weeping. Children roamed about hungry, calling for fathers who would never return. Their little voices broke the hearts of everyone who heard them. They asked questions their mothers could not answer.
Where is Papa?
When will he come back? Why is Mama always crying? Some families could not endure the shame and sorrow. They packed their few belongings and left the village in the middle of the night, saying,
Oke-Odo Village.
We cannot stay here. If we remain, death will meet us too. But leaving did not save them. The curse followed anyone connected to Sola's evil. No matter where they ran to, misfortune waited for them. Goats died suddenly. Children fell sick without reason. No one escaped. The villagers began to live in deep fear. Every cough, every fever, every small cut looked like death waiting to strike. Whenever someone sneezed or stumbled, eyes widened in terror. At night, the whole village was like a graveyard. If a dog barked, people jumped in fright. If the wind blew through the trees, families held each other tightly, believing the gods were passing by. Every strange sound at night was believed to be the gods coming again, searching for another soul to take. Oke-Odo, once full of laughter and life, had become a village of tears, silence, and fear. After many more deaths, the village finally accepted the truth. The stubborn ones who had first argued, saying, "It is ordinary sickness," or "It is just bad luck," could no longer speak. Too many graves had been dug. Too many tears had watered the ground. Even the strongest men now lowered their heads in silence. The shrine priest gathered the people at the village square. His face was tired, his eyes heavy as though he carried the sorrow of everyone. He lifted his staff and spoke with a voice that shook hearts. This curse will not end until the last hand that joins Sola is gone. The land has heard the cry of the shrine. The spirits are watching. Let this be a lesson to every living soul. When you follow a man into evil, you also share in his punishment. The crowd became still. Even the sound of the birds in the trees seemed to stop. Not a child coughed, not a man moved. Fear gripped everyone as the words of the priest sank deep into their hearts. From that day, people began to warn their children more than ever. Fathers gathered their sons and said, "Do not follow bad friends. Do not join hands with evil. Remember Sola and what became of his people." Mothers pulled their daughters close and whispered, "When you see a man walking on the wrong path, run away. Do not laugh with him, do not walk with him, do not join him." The story of Sola is enough for everyone to learn. And so, the name Sola remained a bitter memory in Oke-Odo. It was not only his death that shook the land, but also the countless deaths of his friends, their widows' tears, their children's hunger, and the broken homes left behind. The villagers never forgot. Even after many years, when strangers came and asked, "Why is this village so quiet? Why are people so careful?" the elders would reply, "One man's sin can bring sorrow to many. Evil may look sweet, but in the end, it brings only pain and regret. Remember Sola, the boy who laughed at the gods. His laughter became the tears of a whole village." And whenever the moon shone bright over Oke-Odo, the old women would gather children around the fire and say, "Never forget the story of Sola. It is the story that saved Oke-Odo from more destruction." But even with all the warnings, the shadow of Sola's curse still lingered quietly, as if the earth itself had not yet finished speaking. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Like, share, and drop your comment below.